What's going on, everyone? Welcome to a Tuesday edition of Back Your Play with Q. I'm your host, as always, Rich Quinones. Don't forget, we're brought to you by our very good friends over at Play It Again Sports, 1450 Clemensburg Road in Deptford, New Jersey. Go online, playitagainsports.com, put the location, New Jersey, and let them know you heard about the ad right here on BYP. You'll get 10% taken off your next order, 10% added to your order as well. So go in there. They give you the best bang for the buck with all the merchandise. Trade deadline in the NFL is come and gone. With that, we welcome in on this Tuesday edition our good friend Lloyd Vance, host of Lloyd Vance's Insider Football on Broad Street South. And of course, 102.9 The Game. You can catch him every Monday, 7 p.m. sharp Eastern time. We were thinking about buyers and sellers as we are 8 weeks already into the NFL season. So we know we might get a little late, little flurry here and there, but some big names. And I guess the noise has really been the NFC East, right? We saw what the Eagles did last week. We saw the Giants, Leonard Williams, and then Washington getting rid of two young players that are still very talented early on in their careers in Sweat and Young. Let's start, Lloyd, with the Giants and the move to jettison Leonard Williams to Seattle. I like the return they got. I thought maybe after the debacle of that game on Sunday, you saw that the Giants were going to start to move some of these players. But listen, yeah, you'll take on some of the money. Williams, nice player, good fit for Seattle, but the Giants, in essence, they bought draft picks.
Yeah, situation. The league is different now, which is fun. On my show, I was predicting, not much is going to happen. You're not going to see many trades, but you're seeing some of these GMs. They all know each other. They kind of grow up in each other's front offices, and they get tentacles around the league, and they talk to each other, and that's a lot. What this trade was here. You have Leonard Williams with the Giants, and we know the Giants at this point in the season. Especially after last week, you saw the effort that they put forth. They're 2-6 team now, and Joe Shane, their general manager, he's trying to turn a page, look to the future. So Leonard Williams goes to Seattle, a team. Let's not forget they're in first place now in the NFC West. They've taken over that spot from the Niners, who are trying to do some things we'll talk about in a minute. But Seattle's 5-2, and their defense is built around their secondary. Particularly they have Adams and two nice young pieces they've acquired in the draft over the years. Williams will be able to slide in there. They have not had a really good pass rusher over the years. They've had, Bobby Wagner's back now in the middle of that defense, helping have a lot of tackles, but they need somebody to crush the pocket, and that's what Leonard Williams is going to do for them. So he gets back with his old USC coach. He comes to Seattle, and Seattle gives up a second round pick in
Yep.
2024 and a fifth rounder in 2025. So I think this will work out for both sides.
Yeah, and you mentioned the Giants. I mean, listen, they didn't have any interest in moving Saquon Barkley. So what you can basically do is, okay, listen, franchise tag him again. At the very least, you have a substantial amount of leverage. Maybe you get a deal done with him. They didn't move McKinney. There wasn't really any feelers for Jackson, probably because of how poor he played late against the Jets in that blunder of a game. I do want to ask you this. The game itself was absolutely horrible. I mean, it set offenses back 50 something odd years.
22 punts.
Yeah, right. So in a game like that, where you lose your backup and you bring in a kid off the practice squad, Jersey kid, North Jersey kid, got to play in Giant Stadium, ran the RPO for a touchdown. Great story. You don't allow him to throw. So I do want to ask you, because by the time we hit Friday, it's kind of a dead issue. It's still fresh. In that situation, a little surprised that they didn't sign a Trevor Siemian off the Jets practice squad or a Mike Barkley, knowing that Taylor's injury history, knowing Daniel Jones's injury history. With all that being said, the defense played well enough in a game that all you needed to do was probably make one or two first downs, get a couple first downs, but to not have this kid throw, and then again late, I've been arguing with people back and forth with this. It's a 4th and 1, right? So worst case scenario, if you go for the field goal, you make it, you're up by 6, Jets got to go. squib it, 20 seconds, 70, 80 yards, probably not going to happen with Zach Wilson. You run it on 4th and 1, you get stopped, you lose 7 yards, you still get your defense out there. I think it's a damned if you do, damned if you don't, right? Because afterwards, the head coach comes out and he's talking about the kicker, and then we learned that the kicker banged up a little bit. I mean, you saw the play, the Jets leapt over the line. All of a sudden, you can't make it a straight on kick. He hooks it. It would have been blocked and probably returned the other way. So to me, this is if you go for it and get stopped 4th and 1, why didn't you kick the field goal? If you go and kick the field goal and you miss it, why didn't you go for it on 4th and 1? So I want to get your thoughts on that first, and then I have a couple other questions for you.
Sure, Q. I watched a lot of this game, and there are a lot of head scratchers out there. And Daboll, you're starting to wonder, is he a lot like Matt Nagy? He wins Coach of the Year with a team that was so bad the year before that everybody's happy to make the playoffs, and then they're starting to take the steps back. He's right now, he's not pushing the right buttons. And that key 4th down, as you said, I thought, why not go for it? The Jets don't have any timeouts. You run the football. By the time they get it, there's going to be less time on the clock. And unfortunately, yes, he should probably make that 30-some yard kick. He misses it, and you feel bad for him there. But uh, they just left too much out there in terms of he misses the kick, so it gives him more field position. And then they allow Zach Wilson, who's been playing terrible. He was much better than DeVito in this game, to be honest with you, to make he makes that big throw to Lazard. And then they have just enough time to stop the clock with 1 second left. Zerline makes the kick. And then once you knew it went to overtime, you said, you know what, the Jets are probably done. And I mean, the Giants are probably done here. And it was just a bad situation. And why not go for it? And Daboll, you can see the frustration between him and his team, and they have some work to do there.
Yeah, but then also too, have a little showmanship, sit on the player for a second or two, the clock operator, bail him out, right? I don't have, they said at the end, that the ball just needs to touch the center when they said that's not why they lost the game late. Good job by Wilson for making one play and then, saving that second. Knowing that you're not going to throw the friggin' football, then why do you elect to take the ball in overtime, which is beyond me? That makes absolutely no sense. If you're not, you're going to run it every time, stack the box. And I just felt as though, and Grenoux's been their most reliable player over the last couple of years. He missed 3 field goals all of last year. He missed 1 against Washington last week, then 2 against the Jets. There's 9 points there. They shouldn't have lost that game, but it comes out that Daniel Jones was, quote, cleared, should be ready to go against Vegas. I'm not a fan of tanking, but we'll get to Washington in a second. We saw what Arizona did a couple years ago. We've seen it with the Tennessees. We've seen it with the Cincinnati. We've seen it with teams just put on a bad product. The Colts, fine. Jacksonville. 2-6. Your season's pretty much shot. It's pretty much done. I actually was throwing out there that, listen, you're only starting Jones. Now he cleared. He can take contact. You're not going to stick that kid back there. But if the season goes off the rails and you're top 2 or 3, Indianapolis has a quarterback. Carolina's got a quarterback. That leaves it with Chicago. Who the hell knows what's going to happen? So let's just say you maybe are in the Williams sweepstakes, but if you're number 2 and you elect to keep Jones, well, then guess what? You're probably going to have an opportunity at Marvin Harrison Jr. As well. So I guess my thing is, I was thinking if this really goes off the rails, you're committed to Jones for 1 more season. He's injury prone. He hasn't played well this season aside from the second half against Arizona. Do you even think they would contemplate drafting a quarterback, or that's off the table now because of they didn't move Saquon? Because to me, they go hand in hand. And in hindsight, great player when healthy, bad pick for where you drafted him. You don't draft running backs top 5. So where are you just philosophy right now with the Giants?
Sure, it's a year-to-year league, and this really shows, Daniel Jones, he was the flavor of the month, and after winning that playoff game, they gave him the big contract,
100%.
making an average of $45 million or more season. Yes, they would have to take a huge cap hit if they got rid of him. So obviously they're going to bring him back, but the new philosophy of a lot of these GMs out there that I talk to and personnel guys, they all want this young developmental quarterback, and that's not who Jones is at this stage in his career. So, yeah, I could see them if Drake May's sitting there, why not bring him in? Maybe sit him behind Daniel Jones for a year, and then maybe 2024, 2025, as that cap hit is not as bad on the Jones contract, kind of move away from him for a younger quarterback. So, yeah, they're in the mix at 2-6. Yeah, nobody's going to tank, but obviously with this roster depleted the way it is with injuries, and now they get rid of Williams, and there's just not a lot of talent on this roster. We also know Waller got banged up in this game. Yeah, the Giants are going to be a mix for at least a top 5 pick, and they got to get a difference maker, several difference makers in this particular situation. That Seattle pick in the second round obviously is going to be pretty high, but they got to get about 3 to 4 impact players in those first couple rounds.
Yeah, so Washington trades Chase Young, and again, going back and forth with my buddies. My one buddy is a diehard 49ers fan. I'm listening, motivated. He goes from a team that was in flux that's probably going to fire the head coach and the coordinator. Del Rio and Rivera should be gone. There's no question about it. The enemy's taking a step back. New ownership. We don't know about the quarterback. Played well against the Eagles, had a couple moments in that game. You could have argued should have won the game, but again, the Eagles are just at that level right now where even if they're down 14-17, you don't panic. And they also trade Sweat. So Sweat goes to Chicago. Chase Young goes to San Francisco for a 3rd-round pick. The kid's already got 5.5 sacks, on pace for double digits. I think now you pair him up with Bosa in San Francisco and you've got some friggin' depth. I think that's a great move for San Francisco. I really do, because they know they need that defense has to pick up the offense a little bit, especially with Purdy struggling.
Last couple weeks since week 6 or so, they've been one of the worst defenses in the league, and this was their opportunity. And the thing is, John Lynch, their general manager, is like he's going all in because let's face it, Brock Purdy, they're not paying him, and most teams have that albatross of paying their quarterback. So he's on that rookie contract, and Chase Young, this was a shocker to me. I thought, okay, yeah, Washington says he's out there, but he's such a talent. You figure, okay, they're going to bring him back, and then especially after they traded Sweat, or earlier in the day, and they sent Sweat over to the Bears. We'll get in that in a minute, but it's like, okay, Chase Young, this year he's in the final year of his 4-year contract, so he'll be a free agent. So they'll have to figure that situation out. He does have 5 sacks and 15 tackles this season, rounding back from that ACL injury, and he's an explosive player. So the Niners add him, and they also, let's not forget, they added Randy Gregory.
Yep.
I know he's been kind of a problem child in the past for the Denver Broncos, but they added him too last week. So now that Niners line, you have Young, you have Hargrave, who they signed over from the Eagles. They have Bosa, who's always a defensive player of the year candidate. You have Eric Armstead, who's just a big guy in the middle, and then Gregory. So they're going to rotate guys in, and as you said, they're going to lean on that defense. And maybe, with Christian McCaffrey running the ball the way he is, I think he's number 2 or 3 in terms of rushing yards in the league. They're going to lean on him and take some of the pressure off of Brock Purdy.
Yeah, so you look at San Francisco right now, they've dropped 3 straight. I mean, I don't know if it's just kind of like a bump in the road here. The quarterback has not been playing lights out like we've seen. Cincinnati, I told you, 2 teams, don't sleep on them. Detroit, all of a sudden, boom, took care of the Raiders last night on Monday Night Football. They're 6-2. Cincinnati's starting to wake up. Not a bad flyer for maybe, Trevor Lawrence in Jacksonville, Goff in Detroit, Burrow in Cincinnati. MVP odds are pretty stacked in your favor right now. You get some great value, especially 3,500 to 4,500 for Goff and Lawrence, who, if you remember, those were kind of my 2 dark horses. We actually had Jared Goff kind of under the microscope heading into the season. But be that as it may, you're looking at San Francisco, where the idea now is you have to chase the Philadelphia Eagles, because the Philadelphia Eagles right now, they're 7-1. Again, they came from behind. They beat Washington. They're clearly the best team in the NFC. Poor Captain Kirk goes down with Minnesota. We'll get into the trade for Dobbs in a moment, but the NFC is wide open, but the clear-cut favorite, if this makes sense, has to be right now the Philadelphia Eagles. And I understand the NFC and the NFL is a week-to-week proposition. they can stub their toe and lose to Dallas. Dallas can then be the flavor of the month. San Francisco can go on a run. If you're looking for home field advantage right now and you're the 49ers, you just have to get an alert right now for another trade. What do we got here? So, yeah, that's not a legit. So, yeah, it was like the 49ers were looking
You
at
got to be
Dory
careful
Jackson.
out there. A lot of people trying
Yeah,
to play like
that's
they're
not legit.
Insta reporter.
Yeah, exactly. So, anyway, I apologize for the duck. Anyway, if you're 49ers, man, you got to get it going because you do not want to have to go on the road come January into Philadelphia like you had to do last year.
Yeah, it's going to be a tough situation for them because they're going to try to catch the Eagles. But as you said, the Eagles are finding ways to win. We know their back end is not covering the way they need to, and teams can move the football down the field on them. But they're winning these games, and they can win a shootout type situation, and then they get the bye, they get the big home crowd in Philadelphia. You know how the Eagles fans are in playoffs, and it's going to be interesting to see if the Eagles can get through this stretch. So they have Dallas this week. You know,
Yeah.
this is where the division. This is a huge game. Then the Eagles have their bye. Then they're at Kansas City. They have Buffalo and Philadelphia, and then they have San Francisco and Philadelphia, and then back at Dallas, and then at Seattle. So this stretch coming up is really going to tell us about the Eagles and if that defense is truly ready to shut some people down. They need to get some more pressure on the quarterback. Carter got a little banged up with his back injury. That's going to be something they're going to need to watch. But yeah, you're right. Right now, everybody in the NFC is chasing the Philadelphia Eagles.
Yeah. I mean, listen, it's just teams don't match other teams' moves, right? I mean, there was talk that Washington was going to start selling off if they lost. I mean, hopefully you're thinking differently like that. The Giants just realized they got to start to jettison some of these contracts and some of these players. The Niners know that no matter what, they have to have depth at certain positions and they can win and make a deep run because of their defense. Yes, their offense is going to be there, but it's also banged up, it's a little nicked up, and the quarterback has not played well over the last couple of weeks. So again, you make a move like this. Then conversely, you look at Chicago. What the hell are the Bears doing? I mean, who's really running the show over there? That's a poorly run franchise.
And Ryan Poles is their general manager, and Eberflus is the head coach for now. I think his record's like 5-22 over the last couple of years, and he's not getting the job done. And I think this is building for the future. Now, the interesting thing, Montez Sweat, another guy, uh, they gave up a big price for him. You know, they gave up a second round pick in 2024, going back to Washington. He does have 6.5 sacks this season. They'll be able to put him in there. Chicago has only had 10 sacks this season, the lowest in the NFL. So they're bringing him in there. But I don't think Flus is going to hang around, and they're going to have to rebuild. And Ryan Poles, the general manager, is probably still be there, and we'll see how they do. But yeah, Chicago, that was the surprise that they gave up so much because they're nowhere near the mix this season. We talk about them; they're going to have some high picks coming up in the draft because they have Carolina's pick as well. So you know they're building for the future, and Sweat probably obviously is going to be part of that.
A second round pick. I mean, last year they got fleeced by the Steelers. This year they got fleeced by the Commodores, the Commanders, pardon the Commodores, the Commanders. Maybe they thinking brick house. I mean, I don't know why you would do that if you're Chicago. They got fleeced because think about it. Chase Young was only a third, but you spend a second on Montez Sweat. Chase Young's better than Sweat.
Yeah, well, because he's more explosive and he has that pedigree now. Now Sweat is healthy, and then that's always been a knock against Chase Young, particularly coming off that ACL. But yeah, all things given, yes, Young would be a better player, and you know Chicago's 2-5. As I said, Eberflus 6-20 in his career there. They do have some pieces there. Badgett, the young quarterback's been out there trying to get it done. He had the big win last week. Obviously, this week they kind of struggled, didn't really show up against the Chargers on that Sunday night football game. Chargers took it to them. The score looked better in the game. You know, it ended up 30-13, but they really didn't score a lot within this game. And I do expect the Bears to have a very high pick. And maybe they'll just put Sweat in the cover and get ready for next season.
Yeah, and listen, when you get these guys coming off the last year of their deals and expiring contracts, I get it. I thought Dobbs is not a bad backup pro journeyman quarterback. Terrible news, for Kirk Cousins. He was in line for an absolute monster payday. I mean, it's just unfortunate. And the Vikings still got the win against the Packers 24-10, but it comes with a major price. Now, we talked about how 2, 3 top heavy teams, 49ers, Dallas, and the Eagles in the NFC, everyone else is kind of looking up and chasing them. Minnesota's 4-4. I don't know if they already announced if he's starting next week or not, but I think he can pick up the offense fairly fast. There's familiarity with the Cardinals offense and what Minnesota likes to run, but they've got Atlanta, New Orleans, Denver, and Chicago. I can't, and the Raiders, I mean, they can go on a little run here, and that would put them at 4, 5, 6, 7. That would put them at 8-4, right in prime position with Dobbs. So they've got a little bit of wiggle room. That's why it was so important that they got some of those games. They backed up some of those wins. And think about it. They lost by 3 to start the season against Tampa. You could have made an argument. They had an opportunity to hang tougher and maybe even beat Philly. They should have beat the Chargers. And then they lost by 7 against Kansas City. So Cousins goes down, huge loss, very good quarterback. I'm a huge Captain Kirk fan, but Dobbs comes in, and that offense, even without Jefferson too, they still might be able to put up some points and move the ball. But more importantly, they're just trying to get to 8, 9 wins, and they'll have an opportunity for the playoffs.
Right, Q. And they're only 2 games right now behind the Detroit Lions. I know the Lions are playing very well at 62, but they built themselves back in this mix. Remember, at a certain point, I think they were 1-3, and everybody said, "Oh, their season's over." And now they're 4-4, and yes, Kirk has done a great job in terms of he has 18 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, and it was tough to see him with that Achilles injury, and the team just kind of rallied and they have so many weapons on this team. So they'll get Jefferson back. They're going to start Jaron Hall,
There you go.
who's the young man coming from BYU. He's a 5th-round pick at BYU, rookie quarterback. So he had a bad fumble in the game, but he could do some read option things. But I don't think he'll be the quarterback for long. As you said, Joshua Dobbs at 28, he's been in a lot of systems, the Steelers, Tennessee. He's coming from the Cardinals, where he did a nice job. He has 8 touchdowns and only 5 interceptions this season. A very bad Cardinals team, as we know. They have the worst record in football right now at 1-7. But he did some nice things and kept that team always in the mix. So bring him over. He's a veteran guy. They'll probably slide him in, not this week, but the following week. And they also get Nick Mullins back, a veteran guy, in week 10. So the Vikings, as you said, with one of the easier schedules coming up, this team with O'Connell, what he's built there, they can get back in the mix.
Would you make last night of prior to the game? I guess the Raiders, they had the meetings, players only, cathartic, let it out, here we go. And then the offense does absolutely nothing against Detroit. And Jimmy G, my guy, Jimmy G, it's a good thing he can fall back on his looks. Not a good quarterback. They can't move the ball. They can't run the ball. That head coach looks beyond overmatched. You've got, veteran guys now coming out. Adams coming out, the running back coming out. Everyone's blasting this guy. I mean, and yet turn around and they got the Giants at 4:25 on Sunday. We talk about these coaches under fire. I'm just wondering why in the world is Mike McDaniels? I'm sorry. Why is he still a head coach with the Raiders right now? Is it more of the ownership just refuses to make the change to loyalty? Because this guy is not an NFL head coach.
Yeah, and Mark Davis became enamored with what the Patriots is doing, and he brings over McDaniels, and then McDaniels brings his guy, the GM Ziegler's also from that system, and they're trying to make Patriots West. They have 9 former Patriots on this roster, and it's just not working. We talked about last week in terms of Hoyer and his mess, and Jimmy G, 10 of 21, 126 yards, no touchdowns, 1 interception, and it was just inept. For the majority of this game, they were not moving the football. You feel for Devontae Adams. He overshot him over and over again in this game when he's wide open. And you're right, McDaniels lives off of that Broncos season where Tebow threw the pass against the Steelers. They won that playoff game, but he's a better coordinator. He's always done a better job kind of hiding underneath the Belichick skirt, under his arm, under his wing his entire career, and he's a better coordinator rather than a head coach. So, yeah, Mark Davis does probably need to make a change there. Will he do it? I just don't know if he will, but it's an ugly situation for the Raiders at 3-5, and I just don't see it getting any better.
Listen, there are teams that we talked about it. You get to this point, they will start to make what we like to call business decisions. You'll start to see how they play on Sunday, if they choose to show up, if they choose to play hard. You already got a bunch of embattled coaches on the hot seat. I mean, Denver might have basically saved Peyton from walking away and Russell Wilson from basically calling it a day by getting the win against Kansas City. But again, you go down the line, man. Tomlin has not coached particularly well this year for the Steelers. Dable has not coached particularly well. McDaniels has not coached particularly well. Robert Saleh has not coached particularly well. I don't know what the hell's going on in Atlanta. I mean, how that team is 4-4. If they don't have that kicker, they're not winning some of these games. But that's another team that might be looking about of a quarterback. I mean, Ritter gets benched, and then Heineke comes in. Tennessee, even though they got the win, they're 3-4. I'm a little surprised they didn't move Derrick Henry. Are you surprised he made it through the trade deadline?
No, and all these, and this is what I was used to in the past, and when I was covering NFL on a daily basis. It's most of these guys think they're still in the mix. All these coaches and general managers think, "Oh, we still got a chance." You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And they don't want to help anybody else. And Derrick Henry is a big cog for that Tennessee team. And as you said, 3-4. Yeah, do they realistically? They're probably in the bottom tier of the contenders, and but as long as there's 7 spots and you're getting to that last playoff spot, and you're seeing some teams sneak in there, like the Vikings did last year, and we've seen other teams with losing records like the Bucks did last year. As long as they're getting these opportunities, all these guys are going to keep fighting to the end. And you're seeing the parity queue. There's a ton of teams. There's 5 teams at 3-5 that she'll have a shot. There's 4 teams at 3-4, and then you talked about those 3 teams that are 4-4: the Saints, Minnesota, and the Falcons, and then you have the 4-3 ones in the mix too. Which the biggest surprise to me is the Jets. I can't believe they're 4-3. We talked about that game earlier. Salah has not done a great job with that team. I know everybody's going to say, well, he loses Rodgers and everything, but total shocker them at 4-3. And also we'll throw in the Cleveland Browns, who are 4-3. They're surprise contenders as well.
Yeah, I'm surprised the Jets also didn't go and get backup quarterback. Their offensive line, everyone went down the other day. The Bills made a move. They got Rasul Douglas. The Packers traded him for a 2024 5th-round pick to Buffalo, 2024 3rd-round pick. Detroit in that offense, they acquire People Jones, the wide receiver. Nice player. We talked a little bit about Washington, the Giants. So you mentioned, the Jets and some of the head coaching, some of the blunders. I'm watching, I went back, was traveling, went back and had to watch the game, which was a just mistake on my part. But when do you think the NFL is going to turn around and say enough with these turf fields, these pellet fields, AstroTurf, that whatever they call it nowadays, because you see the pellets shoot up here and there, whatever the hell it is. I don't care about, closing the roof or, you got to spend billions of dollars in taxpayers' money. And some of these games, Northeast, you're meant to play these outdoors, right? To give you that competitive edge and advantage. But I feel as though it's been an alarming number of players that have gone down because of injuries, and it's either non-contact, landed awkwardly, but more times than not, it's because of these fields and this turf.
Yeah, and this is the issue. it's not AstroTurf, but it's synthetic grass is what they have
Yeah.
Q, and they're putting it's cut up tires is what you're seeing most of the times that's popping up there is the rubber from the tires or rubber pellets and it's easier to maintain and in cold weather places and some of the indoor stadiums it's very hard to grow that nice grass and surface that the players like to play on and also when you have the concerts and all and the soccer games and
Mhm.
everything, it's easier to turn everything around playing on that synthetic grass. But there's a huge movement to kind of move away from that synthetic grass and put natural surfaces on all NFL fields. We'll see if that happens. I'll have to go through and add it up, but I think right now, it's probably at least 60% synthetic grass rather than the real thing and a lot of players as you said are getting hurt and it's a situation like Kirk Cousins that was like wow that sure didn't take much for him to tear that Achilles. He got kind of tackled a regular way, his leg bends back, and you wonder about the cleats and the grip into those types of surfaces, how that affects things. And it's definitely something that the NFLPA wants to look at. And this offseason, they're going to look at more. I know the World Cup is coming to a lot of these stadiums in the next couple of years, the Soccer World Cup, and they have to have grass. So they'll be switching over a lot of the surfaces in some of these places.
Yeah, Tuesday edition of BYP with Q. Rich Quinones here. Lloyd Vance joining us. NFL trade deadline on this Tuesday has come and gone the 31st of October, Halloween. So for some teams, some scary notion of finishing out the season because they look friggin' bad. We'll see it in another week or two. Like I said, you just got to watch how some of these teams conduct themselves and some of these players, even though you got to remember everything's on film. I know as far as the weekend, we'll preview on Friday, this weekend's action, but I would be remiss if I didn't ask for game balls over the weekend and Lackey, and I'll take a stab. I don't know if you already tweeted it out. Game
I
ball,
didn't.
I will say, was it a quarterback?
Yes, it was.
Was it the kid from Tennessee?
Yes, you get it right. Will Levis, I mean, he was just tremendous. He comes in there and he goes to Kentucky and he gets his chance as a draft pick. He's 19 to 29, 238 yards, 4 TDs, no interceptions. He found D Hop over and over again for 3 long touchdowns in this game. They have the big win against the Falcons, and the Falcons just had coverage problems on the back end. And it this might have turned their season around. I don't think Tannehill's going to come back and play for them when he comes back from the ankle injury. Levis did look very good in this game.
He seems to be the future, and we forget about the other kid that they drafted out of Liberty.
Yeah, Malik Willis actually started this game. The plan by Vrabel was for them to be rotated. And after a certain point, he said, you know what, Malik, sit down. And we're going to go with Levis in this one.
All right. Was the Lackey given to a coach or a player?
It's a player.
It can't be go grab my shine box, Tommy DeVito. You can't do that to that kid. I can't allow it.
No, I didn't give it to the kid, even though he had -1 yards passing,
Hey,
but
they didn't let the
he
kid throw,
accepted a
man.
bad situation.
I'm gonna say I don't see you giving it to Purdy. Give it to Jimmy G.
I, you know, I I gave it for my show on Monday, and then I almost changed it after last night, giving it to Jimmy G. But I did give it to Brock Purdy.
Oh,
He did look like the last player taking the draft. He was in a 31-17 loss to the Bengals, where they were the favorite, and the Niners' third straight loss. Luckily for them, they had to bye to kind of clean things up. But he was 22-31. Did throw for 365 yards. He had 1 touchdown. He had 2 interceptions, which is another career high for him, and he lost the fumble. So, he was getting hit early and often, high pressure rate in this game, and he just looks kind of lost. You kind of wonder if they should have started Darnold. Remember, he was in concussion protocol all week, and then they cleared him right before the game.
all right. Don't forget, you can get all those nice little nuggets on Twitter if you give Lloyd a follow at Lloyd Vance. Check him out every Monday, 7 o'clock Eastern time with Lloyd Vance's Insider Football, Broad Street South. Go online, broadstreetshot.com, and then you can click on the radio link as well, 1029 The Game. He always joins us on a Tuesday edition. Trade deadline has come and gone this Tuesday edition of BYP. Friday, we will get into the games heavy. We'll look at some of the lines as well. We'll give you some good trends, give you some good favorites. We'll also, Lloyd and I will kind of go back and forth. I'll let it sit, marinate for a couple of days. But right now, NFL MVP, we'll let that sit and marinate. And we'll get into a week 9 already in the NFL on a Friday edition of BYP. Always appreciate a couple moments, pal.
Q, thanks for having me on.